Welcome to the second episode of the mentoring session for Surprise Multiplayer. I am Ozzy Monroe. Are we on episode 2 already? It's been so long. Feels like forever. We have John and Jeremy, and tonight we have a special guest, Jen Swan. Jen, why don't you take a moment to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm really glad to be here. Thank you guys for inviting me. I'm Jen Swan, or Jennifer Swan. I'm a cybersecurity professional. I've been in the field for about 11 years. Graduated in 2012. I'm from Baltimore, Maryland. I moved to DC about 5 years ago for this role here. I've been director for about 3 years. I'm managing 3 cybersecurity teams, and just happy to be here.
So wait, before we even start, do you prefer Jen or Jennifer?
Whichever you prefer, Jen or Jennifer. I know Jennifer sometimes is, 3 syllables. If you don't feel like saying it, so you could say Jen.
Okay.
Great intro, second time, because we're recording this a second time because we've done mess ups as always, but it's wonderful to have you here. Thank you so very much. So we discussed a little bit about your teams and where you are, but I also wanted to pull apart, like you mentioned that it happened pretty quick. So what were you doing before in this current role? And like you said, you were pretty technical. So where were you before, and how did the transition happen to your current job?
Yeah, absolutely. So at my current role, I was the senior manager of incident response. We had a little turnover, and I just realized that we needed sort of like a leader to step up and manage the teams. We were kind of without a leader, so I just took initiative because we needed to, not because I wanted to move up, but because security due diligence. I wanted to make sure our security posture was sound. And that's not something I was preparing for at the time. So it's just something that kind of fell into my lap, but really grateful for the opportunity and the investment that my company put in me, but I had to kind of learn quick.
Yeah, that filling a gap when like you're seeing it means there's also usually not the normal planning structure. Like, hey, this is what I want. This is what I've been working towards. So you kind of just do it. And
Right.
I think it's the best way to learn. It's how I've learned absolutely everything. But at the same point in time, it kind of leaves you with the doubt of, did I miss something? You constantly are like, hey, I'm learning on the job. I'm learning fast, but did I miss something? Is there a deficit someplace? And I have that still to this day. I still go around it. I'm very confident in my role, but I still think like, hey, what do I miss? And that never really goes away, especially if you're one of those people that constantly are pushing yourself to do more, climb to positions that's necessary, not just because you want them, but because they need to be done. But in this function, when you took it on, you were a very technical incident response role. Do you still miss that role? Do you still miss that responsibility of like, hey, getting on the keyboard, touching the keyboard and knowing, hey, when I type this, I get output and then I get action and I know, and I get that fulfillment and that feedback. By the way, I can see the smile, so I already know the answer.
Well, all right. I don't miss the scary parts of incident response, but I do miss the threat hunting. I do miss the exhilarating like mad dash to find things and do investigations and things like that. That's just my nature. I love figuring things out. I love scripting. I love doing things like that. So yeah, I do miss, as you said, putting my hands on keyboards and like really getting into it. But also really thankful to be in this position. But as you said earlier, I think you made a good point. Sometimes you feel like you miss something, especially when that step happens. It's something that I absolutely wanted. It just, obviously didn't happen in a timeline that I had expected, but happy to be here. And I think another thing that I think bothers me a little bit is that, like I said, I'm a female. There's not a lot of females in tech. I'm also an African-American female. I'm also younger than a lot of my peers, I'm in my 30s, and, a lot of my peers in their 40s and 50s. So like that kind of creates some doubt a little bit too, right? Like, oh, this happened too fast. Like, am I doing a good job? Is this what they're expecting? And I think I'm trying to overcompensate for some of those things that I have in my head.
There are a couple of real things that most people deal with that most people don't talk about. Imposter syndrome is one of them. It's something that I've dealt with mostly all my career, still deal with it. I work to get better at it. But there are times when I dip back into it, and there are times when I build my confidence and come back out of it. So that's something, as long as you're cognizant of that and you work towards getting better at it, then over time it will get better. But there are the other things that you mentioned are real challenges that you may have to face. Sometimes it may not be real. Sometimes you're in the room and nobody's paying attention to the fact that you're a female, younger, African American, but you still have those feelings and you still sort of have that sort of stigma hanging over you, and you have to navigate that within yourself first. And part of navigating that is, the way I dealt with it is just developing a little bit of a sort of attitude. Like, I'm here, I'm in the room, I deserve this seat, and we're just going to navigate through it. If you have a problem with my age, my color, the amount of time I've been in security, that's for you to deal with. I'm just going to do the best I can. And that's sort of the attitude you have to take on to sort of navigate those feelings.
Absolutely.
And I think there's something else on top of that is sometimes faking it till you make it is a good attitude, because presenting that you got it is important. And so all those feelings you have, you're a leadership position, you have to invert that and still project leadership. You have to show that to everybody because people respond to it. I find that to be the hardest, to not because it's not a truism, because I do believe that's necessary. People need to have a consistent vision. They need to believe in the person. But that transition of hey, I have to overcome my own issues and present a good face forward to everybody at all times. It's not a lie. It's the best way to get the outcomes you need and for them. And they're happier because of it, because they feel like there's a connection there. They're on a mission, and those doubts are yours for you. And they're happier with the more sure person, the more confident person. It's hard to get there, but I'm telling you, it's almost an internal thing I feel myself with that imposter syndrome. And then I find that I'm even better because I'm projecting outwards.
Yeah, I think you need, there are times where you need to kind of commit to your own uncertainty in a decision, and just make the decision. And then when you make that decision as a leader now, as a director, a leader of many teams and people, when you commit, uh, depending on how you react to committing to something, will send a message to your team underneath you. So if you commit to a decision, or commit to a goal, or commit to a response, to a project, or even a person, if you do it so strongly, and if you do it in a way that projects leadership and projects confidence and projects that not only is it going to get done, but it's going to get done correctly, that's how people will now take that the goal, and they'll treat it like that. Not only will they put it at the top of their goals, but they're going to make sure to get it done, and get it done quick, because they see how important it is to you, or important to the organization, because of your response.
There's a very fine line between confident and overconfident, and you have to toe that line.
I haven't figured that one out.
You have to toe that line. Being confident and standing by your decision does not mean that you cannot admit when you're wrong. Or sometimes I feel it's okay to make a decision and say, listen, I'm not 100% sure that this is the correct decision, but I need to make a decision. And this is the direction we're going to head in. And if we realize that this is not the right decision, then we'll readjust, right? And we'll redirect. But that's typically done in the absence of a surefire decision, right? If you have, 3 options in front of you and one is not overwhelmingly better than the next, then you can sort of state that claim and just take the decision on yourself.
Absolutely.
I know John is smiling like.
I do have a question.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was smiling because when you're in a certain role, as you become manager of teams, sometimes you need to project more confidence in something than you actually have in order for the organization to respond. in a certain way.
It's counterintuitive, but sometimes, like, we've talked about this before on the podcast, John. I worked for somebody in my last role, and made a decision, and he moved forward. And he was always willing to make another decision to change course, but that decision was made quickly, efficiently, with the best information at time and moving forward. And he was willing to readjust 2 weeks later or whenever more information was available. But that moving forward, that taking that step and committing to something gets people on board so quickly.
Conviction.
It's nothing like a group of people that like, no, well, we know what we're going to do for the next 2 days. It's hard. It's hard to make that decision, especially if you have a little bit of imposter syndrome, a little bit of feeling like, hey, I got here quickly. I don't fit in with the group as the normal. I completely understand that. But I'm gonna tell you the value of your outcomes, because you're going to be evaluated as leadership on the outcomes more and more. That's the way to that those decisive decisions lead you to better outcomes. Still means you can make changes. You can be wrong. You have incomplete information, but making those decisions will always be the right choice.
Absolutely.
And Jen, I know you're going to ask a question, but just one disclaimer. You only get X number of those. You make the decision and it turns out to be the wrong direction before you start to lose the trust of your team, right? So that's important as well.
Absolutely. One thing about me is it's like you see all the good work you've done. Like I absolutely know that I'm in the almost 4 years that I've been director, that we have come a long way. The team is thriving. The team is a lot bigger than it was before. We're getting to a lot more initiatives. So I definitely see the fruits of my labor and all the decisive decision making that I have. But again, it's more of like, I feel like I have this infinite like thing where I can't do enough, and I think that's really like the crux of things for me. So very, very confident in like building the team, growing the team, making decisions. I always just feel like I'm not doing enough. But I realize that is, again, as we just talked about, my imposter syndrome. Ozzy, I know you and Dive talked about that a lot on the side. So it's just something that I have to work on, as you guys have mentioned. And, even if I'm scared, fake it till I make it, I definitely understand that. Even if I'm like unsure, fake it till I make it, which, I haven't really done as much. I always want to make sure I know everything. Again, I feel like I'm overcompensating all the time. And that's really, really the issue. But I do have a question for you guys. Like, have you guys experienced, as I know we've talked, but have you experienced imposter syndrome?
Absolutely.
Constantly.
Have and still do. I mean, I think at no point in my career have I ever been comfortable enough that there wasn't something I was thinking, oh, I don't think I'm ready for this, or am I really the person doing that has this team underneath me and this is the decision I'm about to make? And because I think it happens in a gradient, right? So you'll get that feeling even if you're confident in your role. There'll be a decision you need to make at some point, and it'll be in the back of your head, like a little, like something you didn't remember, but a person that you thought you saw before, and you'll be like, wow, I'm about to make this decision and I'm going to commit, and this means potentially millions of dollars of people now are going to do this now for the next year. You'll have that throughout your whole career.
It just gets bigger.
Yeah,
the stakes get bigger. Which it's still fun too. But
I hope that didn't scare you.
No, but
I don't think he was talking to you, Jeremy. He was talking to Jen.
Yeah.
My camera broke. There's something.
Scare Jeremy frozen.
Yeah. There's something on top of that that's really interesting. When you start taking the more responsibility, the way you make decisions becomes easier because of that. I'm doing this not just because I know it's the right choice. It's because I have a team helping, making sure I have the information, because I have a structure underneath me to make sure that information is well vetted by people I trust. so that you can make more decisions with less information because you know the BS, the bullshit, the stupid ideas that you'd have to normally deal with have been vetted out by your team. That the information you're getting, so you're going to get 20 minutes of a prep on an idea you got to make a decision on, but you can make that decision because you had a team that spent 4 hours across 3 different teams going through, and they had 2 people go through that, spend 8 hours going before that to get to their synthesis. That process is really, really important to overcome that imposter syndrome. Know that you don't have to know the details. You have to build the teams and the structures underneath you and around you to get you the information that can get you to a decision point where your experience, your time, and your authority and your position and all of those things come together where you can say, making this decision, I don't have complete confidence and I don't know every single gotcha here, but I know the information presented has come through a machine and a system that makes sense. That is one of the hardest things to set up. And it's the hardest thing I see for new managers of managers to build. Because when you're a manager, nothing you do is anything like that. You're kind of somewhat doing that for your manager of managers, but the good ones are going to start building that set of skills right as you're at the director level. And you have to have it on the next couple levels up. Otherwise, you will just fail because there's no way to know that much information.
Absolutely. And I actually want to dig on that a little bit. You mentioned about being prepared and your team doing some of the legwork for you. How do you find balance in involving your team in decision making? I guess sometimes I feel like this is an issue that I do have. Like, if I don't have enough information, I prefer to go back and talk to my team before making any major decision. Something where I know the impact is not going to be like large or big. I don't have a problem, but like I find that I'm always talking to my team. What do you think about this? What do you think about this? This is my current thought. How do you feel? So like, I don't know making if I'm making the decision making process too complicated or not.
I'm going to challenge you because I'm going to say the words you chose. I think everything you do is fine. Just the words you chose were slightly different, wrong. And you should do those sometimes. I want to make a decision about X. Bring me the answer. Not how do you feel. And then come back and say, I need it by Friday at 2. And
Okay.
then but the whole point of that is they have to go behave somewhat like a manager. They're going to kind of make it. You might have to double do the work,
Hmm.
but then you can question them. You can give them feedback and you can mentor and lead them on their thinking process. Now you've accomplished 2 things. One, you've gotten new information you needed. You got their perspective and you didn't force your own opinions on them. So you got a fresh idea. And more importantly, they feel like they can provide raw, complete, total ideas to you rather than just responding to questions. You need to do both. You need to
Hmm.
have that back and forth, but you also need to be able to invert it and say like, hey, I need an answer on this. I'm delegating it to you. You're coming to me. I'll take it to management.
Okay.
I just want
That's
to,
good.
sorry, John, go ahead.
Yeah, I would say, just a core of I kind of live by the adage of get as many hands possible on the axe handle. Uh, not just for the bad things, but for the good things as well, right? I think at a certain point you're the decision maker for certain decisions, right? Uh,
Hmm.
and if it's one of the decisions that, as an organization, you need to make that call, and your team needs to follow, that you should get all the people who are smarter than you
Hmm.
to give you all the information and get their opinions as well.
Absolutely.
I just wanted to expand on something that Jeremy said because it's really important. It's a lesson that I learned when I started leading my team. And it's key going to your team with your preformed opinion and asking them to sort of validate that is not the correct approach. Because what's going to happen is you have your preformed opinion. Most of the people are going to not want to go against what you've already predetermined. And they're going to agree with whatever your opinion is. You might have a couple of people that will say, well, no, I don't think it's A, I think it's B. But if you go in like Jeremy suggested and you say, hey, This is what we're trying to do. What's the right solution? I need the solution. I need the right answer. Let them go away and come back with a proposal. And then you can sort of make your decision based on that proposal. The other key part there, and it goes back to the imposter syndrome bit a little bit. When they come back to you at any point when you're leading a team, if you don't understand or you don't have the knowledge on a specific area that they may be discussing or bringing to you, it's a little counterintuitive, but you have to be okay with saying, I have that acronym you just mentioned. I don't know what that is. Explain that to me. There's a lot of power in doing that. You might feel like, because I have the imposter syndrome, I don't want people to know that I don't know something, but it's actually the reverse. There's a lot of power in standing up and saying, I don't know that. So explain that to me. So those are two key factors, I think, that should be noted.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely agree, especially the second point about just being transparent about your knowledge, because I actually have no shame in that, especially if I'm working with a team outside of cybersecurity. Like, say I'm working with engineering and we're talking about specific infrastructure that's relatively new for a lot of folks. I have no problem. In fact, I did that today because I'd be doing a disservice if I pretended to know exactly what they were talking about, right? Just like if I were to talk about, acronyms we use, IOCs, different things like that in cybersecurity, they wouldn't know, right? So I definitely agree with that. I definitely try my best to be transparent about my knowledge of areas I don't know. When it comes to cybersecurity itself, I'm pretty confident in that and my knowledge. So I don't see a lot of that. But when it comes to like direction, so I have my teams, you have threat response, you have AppSec, you have different teams underneath you that I don't have, I'm not doing the day to day. So I bring them in sometimes on a lot of the things that come from the top, just to make sure that I'm not thinking about this the wrong way. But I definitely agree with you, Jeremy and Ozzy, that maybe I should change the wording so I'm not persuading them to agree with me in my approach. I do see how that could come across. It's like, I don't want to go against the leader. So I definitely appreciate that.
Well, I want to really hit the point home. It's not just like this is a bad habit of I see of I'd say 50 to 70% of leaders. They're the first people to talk. You should be the last person to talk. I know it's trope and everybody says it. It really is unbelievably powerful to let other people talk and then only correct when necessary, because every time you correct somebody or you take something, you're using something up. You're using up some amount of time with them, an ability to mentor them, the ability to spend with them. That's really tough because you can only do so much. But I want to pull out something that I found interesting in that is that the point I was making wasn't only just to not overcome, but to task them with something of that is your work. The reason being I say that is because it's really important to give them some of your work. That's how you get less of it. That's also how you test out how they're capable and who's capable. You're going to get some of these things back, whether that they like PowerPoint presentations, strategy things that you like. Hey, I need somebody to tell me where we should be heading. All those things, and they'll come back and you'll be like, "This is unusable." But that's something you learned about somebody. And then you can sit there and say like, "Hey, this person, let's go help them level out. They don't know this. That's great. I can spend time. I can train this person. I can mentor this person." Or I can say like, "Great. We know where your specialty is. It's not this. Let's go find some other trees and other things to go try out. What's the next thing?" So there's just so much information you can get by giving them tasks and things that you need to do that will give you great feedback for yourself about who they are and whether they're able to take on the next thing. And you'll be amazed. Some of the people you thought were not capable of doing something will be like hit it out of the park. They will sit there and you'll be like, holy crap, they did that? That's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. I could definitely give them more tasks. I think my team is amazing. And I just want to call that out. I have an amazing team, and I think they do a really great job. But I do agree, maybe I could give them more of some of the things that I am tasked to do, just to even just for preparation for the next level. But I think that given a task, they do a great job. So I just want to call that out about my team.
Hey, they can't always be great about everything. That's not possible. I mean, that's a reality. But I mean, that's the things. The individuals have different places in the organization. They do certain things well, and you have to find out which ones fit the best parts of the role. And that's wonderful stuff to figure out. Because then they get to be better at what they want to be. They get to show task and go deliver more value in those areas. It's pretty
Mhm.
awesome. So Jen, you give us some of the where you want to go. Where do you want to take this? Where we like you mentioned some of the problems where you want. Well, where do you want to go? What's your 3-year goal? What's your 5-year goal? Do you want more? Do you want to just continue doing this? You want to take on larger? You want to where you want to take this career of yours next?
Sure.
Or before you answer, or are you too far in the weeds where you can't even think about a 3 or 5-year goal at the moment? Because that's
That's
possible as
valid
well.
too.
Yeah.
I think that, I mean, that's a valid point, Ozzy. Definitely understand where you're coming from there. I think 3 to 5 years from now, I think one of the things that I'm really dedicated to is making sure that I'm doing the best that I can at my company and maturing the program and continue to do that. I'm aligning our cybersecurity goals with our business objectives. I'm continuing to do that. As you guys have mentioned, mentoring the team a little bit more, better, making sure that I'm preparing them and tasking them correctly. So that's very valuable. I think in about 3 years or a couple years or a year, whatever that looks like, because I can't put a time on that. Um, I think I need to reevaluate to see exactly where I am. Have I given all I can to my current role? And when I say that, I mean that's when I'll ultimately want to go to my manager and expand my duties. I want to ultimately become a CISO at some point in my career. Um, I think right now I still am working on a lot of things, and I think I need to continue to work with leadership on, you know, doing a lot of the forecasting and things that they're working on in coming years and things like that, mentoring a team. But I think my ultimate goal is to become a CISO at my company at some point in the future. But I'll reevaluate what that timeline looks like in probably a year or two.
Ti Timelines are always rough, everything changes, but, so see, you wanna be CISO, you wanna head towards that direction, you wanna do it at your current company.
Yes.
Awesome,
I,
awesome.
I just want to say, and I'm not saying it just because I was, I love my company a lot. And I think that I have the best management and I have a great team. As I mentioned earlier, like I spent a lot of my years in cybersecurity. I know you guys have spent a lot of time in your careers as well, but this is the first company where I felt like they really invested in me and they believe in me and they believe in my leadership. So I don't want to let them down. And I think that's where a lot of my concerns and of course my internal thoughts come from. So I found a home here and if possible, I would like to grow at this place. So,
I'm gonna say something that is not appropriate for the company that you're working for, because I know who some of these are. A company can't have loyalty. It cannot. Person can, people can, groups can, humans can. A company cannot.
mhm.
And so your career and who you are and where you're headed is always going to be a priority for you and only you. Do not just do loyalty to a company. It is the biggest mistake I see for anybody is to think that a company can return that loyalty. Doesn't mean you can't be loyal. Doesn't mean but they are inherently not a human. They are not a person and they cannot be loyal back.
I I agree. So I'm gonna agree with Jeremy's statement, but I'm gonna word it slightly differently because I think that a company isn't a company's not at least yet isn't something that isn't conscious and it's the sum of all its parts, and it's absolutely all right to be part of a larger team and to be loyal to people and relationships that you have as a professional, and um often for many of us that is a good portion of our career is at a handful sometimes companies. In some cases, maybe 2, 1 company. Um, but it's always important to remember that, it is the people that you work with, right? And it's the relationships. And even though you're all working towards the same goal, for the company you're employed by, um, your your power in that company is what you've is built through the people that you have relationships with, and and the good things you've done because of those relationships.
It's funny. I sort of agree with the sentiment also. And I was going to say the same sort of thing, just probably couched in a different way. You get to a point where you realize that you have to dedicate some focus to yourself. And what I mean by yourself is not just improving yourself so you can be a better employee to the company. It's just being a better version of yourself. And however that sort of materializes, however that looks for you, that's what it is. For me, I'm at the point where I start to think about sort of my legacy. And I don't want any age jokes, John. All right. But I start to think about my legacy, and when it's all said and done and I'm no longer here, what are people going to remember me for? Right? Are they going to remember me for my current position? Are they going to remember me for the D&I work that I do with other organizations outside of Bloomberg? Are they going to remember me for my volunteer work? That's what's important to me. And that's sort of what I'm working to build up now, in addition to networking and getting myself out there more, because that's important, because I don't want to just pigeonhole myself into just knowing the people within my company. I've done that for many years. And now I'd like to expand that. But those are the bits that I think are important. And I think that satisfies the same thing that Jeremy said, same thing that John said. It's just a different way of saying it, I guess.
Yeah, and I just want to say I agree with all of you. I think y'all make very valid points. Definitely cultivating relationships outside of my organization. Even though that's something that I would like, I understand and I can't really tell what the future holds. But if you ask me now, I'm just really happy and comfortable where I am until I'm not. And that's really kind of what I was getting at. But I do agree. I think, Jeremy, you said it very well. And I definitely understand where you're coming from. I think all your points are very valid. John, I agree. The relationships that you have, kind of speaking to Jeremy's point, um, right now I have those relationships now, but those people may not always be there. So that could change, So I totally understand that. So those relationships I cultivated may not be the same relationships in 5 years. So I understand that. And Ozzy, I think you also make a great point. And that's why I'm so dedicated to a lot of the projects that I have outside of my job and work. Working on a lot of things. I do a lot of dev things, projects. I've worked with Meta. I've worked with a lot of different people on special projects. So like, I definitely am not single looking at my company, but for my cybersecurity career, uh, this is where I am at right now.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. The amount of people that don't have that external connectivity, they don't go explore it because they are spending so much time in their mental capacity in working towards the current company that they're at, that they're not doing that. Wonderful to hear that you're doing beyond that, and you're growing your network, you're growing your people and your relationships beyond that, because ultimately that's the most important thing. Said much better by John and Ozzy, is the people, and how we in Dominant was where you work, but there's a lot more companies out there. There's a lot more great people to spend time and build relationships with throughout, and it's wonderful to hear that you're doing that. Um, so what is it about the CISO you want to do? And the reason why I say that is I'm not interested in how to get there, but why you want to be in that position. What do you find enticing about it? What do you want to be there? Is it the process? Is it the methodology to get there?
I'm going to say a word, but I feel like you guys are going to come back if I say this word.
That's fine.
No,
No,
And I
no,
also don't
no,
want to say
no,
um,
no. Say it. Say it.
more flexibility and freedom. And I understand that that is very limited no matter what I do. But I kind of have a vision for the cybersecurity program. Um, and that's not something I can implement right now the way we are.
So explain flexibility and freedom. I think that's important.
the freedom to build the cybersecurity program exactly the way that I see it maturing. I feel like right now, again, I just don't want to give too much information about how we work, but right now, some limitations. And I would like to see it grow a little bit beyond where we are. And unfortunately, just the way that we're set up, it's not possible.
I'm gonna say at one of my last roles, when I took over a position much like yours, I took it to do that because I thought it was done wrong. And this is a driving force of who I am. Nothing will make me do more work faster than saying it can't be done, or showing me a problem saying it's perfect as is when it obviously isn't. And I spent a large amount of time in that role for 2 years, ripping it down and feeding security through the entire company because I thought it needed to be fixed and it could be better. And that drive and that vision is awesome. And that's what leadership is about, is having a vision and then saying, I'm going to go do that. And I'm going to go drive it. And so that's awesome. That's a good reason to want to be a CISO, not for title, not for control, not because it gives me the authority and power, but because I want to make this place better. Because it's a support role. It's a leadership role, but it's still a support role. And you have to be wanting to make the company better in order to be effective in that role.
You can see, Jeremy, I'm obsessed with making things better. So
So, what other challenges are you facing, or maybe some other questions that you might have for us that we can try to help you with?
how or so one of the things that I'm really happy that we're doing now is that I get in front of our CEO a lot more and I can explain the various initiatives we have going on, the various our status in each area and across our applications, our security posture, our infrastructure, all of that. What are some things I get one of the things that I really want to do is focus on things that the CEO cares about. I know he cares about all of this, but I think I'm still struggling trying to understand what I should be presenting to him on certain things, right? Like I have an idea, he asks a lot of questions, but I'm always trying to think like, is this really valuable to him? Am I giving him too much verbiage? Like I find myself going over time because I'm explaining everything. I feel like I'm just feeding him too much. So from a leadership visibility standpoint, what are some things that you guys recommend that I can do to allow the CISO, the CEO to have some transparency in the work that we do?
There's
John?
there's definite art to this, by the way.
There, so I'll say a few things. There's definitely an art to it. A good CEO will let you know if you're telling them too much or if they want to understand more, and don't take the fact that they're listening to you and not responding as you over communicating. And honestly, that's a good note for any leader that you're communicating with, not just necessarily the one that's, the head of the company, or even, your direct line managers. Um, but to Ozzy's point, there's definitely an art to how to present information, depending on the type of information, how dense it is, and the person you're talking to. If the person you're talking to is a CEO that is not very technical, but they're outcome driven. They're much more interested in maybe not having to navigate around an audit issue or a security incident, right? They might be asking questions that are on the perimeter of the problem because they're trying to understand the impact and how they're going to need to communicate to other stakeholders. If the leader or the CEO is asking very direct questions, or if they're not asking enough questions, I think you need to then gauge, is what you're actually trying to communicate, are you getting the right response?
Mhm.
And if you're not getting the right response, and now you're doing it right now, you're questioning, should I change how I'm delivering that message or the update. The one thing I would say though is never not communicate something because you're worried that they're not listening. If you're on a call and no one else is talking, you're the only one talking, there are people listening to you, and make sure what you're saying is succinct enough that you can get it across quickly.
Okay. Great advice.
I'm going to use the standard. It's always about the person that you're talking to, and it changes drastically if there's an audience or not. If this is a one-on-one conversation, it is fundamentally different than a group setting. And you just need to know and figure out that each one of those independently. As a security team, you're all inherently a support organization, unless you're a company that builds security services. And because of that, you have a lot of free information to attach to make sure that you're driving not just the security program agenda, but that the security program is supporting the top line business agenda. So you can work with the technology team, the business teams, whoever, to make sure that they're have a good integration point, because they're just as much your advocate and your support as the CEO is. So if you're there and you're not talking with the CTO, if it's like not a group setting, you might want to talk like, hey, how is your program helping the CTO to reduce problems, to get code out in a more timely manner, to make it more secure by default, to give them less choices in the security domain so they can move faster with less review process, whatever it is. And then by doing that, you're coming with a cohesive strategy. And nothing is going to be better to a board of directors or a CEO. Oh, I got people working together and they're making things better. Oh, this is what I want to hear. Because inherently, security is going to be seen as, oh God, they're going to tell people no a lot. And so the more you can get away from that, the better.
And make
Absolutely.
sure if you're going to reference another team or another position like the CTO, make sure the CTO is aware of that as you go talk to the CEO, because it might be just, a very casual conversation. You might not even get feedback from the CEO, but the CTO doesn't want to all of a sudden get a call from the CEO saying, hey, I heard you were working with the CISO on project X. CTO wants to know before he gets that call, so that, goes back to some of the information we talked about before. Maybe the CTO needs to check with his direct reports to get some information on project X, and he doesn't want to get caught off guard. So you want to make sure that you make your peers and the other people in the company aware if you're going to bring up something and present it to the CEO.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I think all of that is really sound advice. I do have an audience every time. So it does change the conversation a little bit. But
Do you ever, in that audience setting, do you ever prepare? Do you prepare individually or with other big people that are going to present?
I prepare it myself, and I bring it. I allow the people when I prepare like a deck or something like that, I send it to everyone a couple days ahead, and like, this is what I'm going to talk about. Do you have any questions? The CTO is included. The other people are included in that conversation, so they have questions they can ask beforehand. So they're all knowledgeable of what's going
They're
on.
all knowledgeable, but the reason why I was saying is that then you can, but are there any things like, hey, you can go with a CTO and it's like this is an initiative that's been really successful between our two things. Instead of me producing a deck, how about we present together on the benefits to your technology team and what you guys were achieved? And I can present what we were able to achieve and how our oneness or harmony or whatever terminology has produced even better results. Because that's the hard thing for leaders at that level to get people working across those
Yeah.
boundaries.
So I can attest to that. So if there's a difference between a call that happens every 14 days, every 2 weeks, sorry, maybe even weekly, and getting a status update individually from 5 or 6 people, then if you have a call that call happens, and then one of the calls you have 2 of my leaders jointly presenting something and how it was beneficial. It's a lot not only it makes both leaders look better than all the rest, first of all, but it also gives the CEO much more confidence in all the teams and all the people that that you're talking about, the team that you're leading, because they see that there's now cohesion that's happening, and it's one less thing they have to worry about.
Yeah, I think that could be a little better. There is some cohesion, so I do present with someone else. We work on similar initiatives. For instance, security awareness training or something like that. Both of our teams work on it. So we kind of present that our initiatives that we collaborate on together, but it's not like a special project or something like that where we're presenting, hey, this is the project that we did. So I definitely feel like that could be better, but we do present on our shared initiatives together. Um, when it comes up. So I could definitely work on that.
There's another thing, and this isn't about that relationship, but to give it some different perspective. Um, I had 6 managers reporting to me, and when they came to me with proposals and decks as individuals, I could say no, and then I would send them back, and I'd say, "Bring your peers," because they're the team. So 5 managers, they were another team themselves. They were my leadership team, and they needed to work together. And the most empowering thing I could tell them, I'm like, try to explain this, but they eventually got it. You know, if 4 of you come as one person, I can't say no unless it's just plain wrong, because there's no budget, there's no whatnot. But if it's just a decision, because there's a lot of power in numbers,
Yep.
there's a lot of power in the ability to convince people, hey, I think they're wrong, but 4 people that I've trusted and built a team and relationship with are coming forward to say that this needs to happen. It's important. That's a big barrier. That's a big burden to say no. I can't make money growing trees. I can't give them an extra $1 billion. I can't change physics, but I have to really take that decision very, very seriously.
I actually think that's really, really valuable advice there. I agree.
There's something interesting that happens when when manage when people become, individual contributors, work on a team. They generally work towards one or two epic goals projects at the same time, right? Depending on how large your teams are. But when someone leaves that role as an individual contributor and then becomes a manager, they start treating their team as a unit, and they start trying to correctly manage and gauge priorities and start to manage the people on that team. And then when you get to the role that you're in, now you're starting to think, okay, as now I have several teams that I'm trying to manage priorities for. I'm going to rely on my managers to manage the individual priorities, but now I need to think horizontally, or maybe outside of my organization, how these teams are going to interact, and start to manage business priorities. Then as you can think, the people on the bottom, you and everyone else, as they're working, they're trying to like manage their own span of control and their goals and the scope of their role. A lot of times in support organizations, especially like CISO, infrastructure technology, software infrastructure teams that are that aren't building a product, they forget how to work together with their immediate peers because it's not what they're thinking about. So you don't, as someone, you might not think that the person who who's adjacent to you in an organization that, you rely upon a lot, but isn't your customer, you don't necessarily think, oh, wow, how do we work together and how do we make our relationship and our teams more efficient? And that continues sometime for a while before, a leader or a team figures it out that they need to actually work on that.
Absolutely.
And to make that personal, I think that is the key component I've added to be why I was successful. It wasn't because I was technical. It was because I was able to look laterally and willing to play connections of things I saw and connect them together and then speak up. That would be probably my biggest contribution to every job I've ever had.
That's really valuable. I appreciate that. Yeah, that's great. Definitely have some things to take away from this conversation for sure. But I do have another question.
Of course.
We kind of talked about mentoring, right? What advice, aside from the advice you've already given, would you suggest to further, I guess, mentor and mature and put into my teammates? Like, what are the things that you would advise me to do as a director? What is it that I can do for my senior managers below me to help them become better leaders?
I'll go first. Sorry about this. You can have your status meetings. You can have all your normal meetings, but you need to have a one-on-one meeting with your managers, and you cannot talk. Let them lead the conversation. It is their time. By having it be their time, they can't say anything wrong. They just get to explore whatever they want. And if they don't, you have to extract some out. You have to sometimes pull. You have to make it comfortable for them. But that time needs to be for them, their mentoring session. Like, what do you want to do? You want to be a CISO too? Great. How do I help you? You want to learn how to be a CEO? Great. How do I help you? Do you know how to do budgets? Great. Let me teach you that. Whatever it could possibly be, you have to make it exposed to them so that you can learn about them. And then from there, start spending time to either find things they don't like and explore things they do and keep them growing. The key, I found that the one-on-one meeting is the most important meeting for that, but it can have zero status updates. It has to be a completely not them. They can't bring anything work-wise. We're not talking about plans. I don't care what's going on. This meeting is about them. And carving out that time also shows that they're supposed to do it for their teams. They're supposed to make the time available for the people that they're supporting as managers.
I like that because I'll be honest with you, that's not something that I do. It's not something that I do all the time. It definitely becomes a status meeting. Also, but a check-in meeting as well. But when you mention just having it all about them, allowing them to speak, that's something I absolutely don't do and something I could definitely work on.
So Jeremy stole a little bit of my thunder. But
Sorry.
no, that's all right. When I first started leading my current team, I sat all the individuals down separately and I asked each one of them, what are your career goals? What does your path look like? 3, 5 years, whatever it is. But I made it clear to them that that path could be something within a team. It could be something within a department. It could be something within a company. It could be something outside of the company. I felt that as their manager and their leader, it was my responsibility to help them achieve their goal, whether it's something within a company or something outside of the company, or whether it's something within information security, or maybe they wanted to make a complete career change. So I dedicated myself and I made a promise to them that I would help them achieve their goal, no matter what it was, whether I benefited from it or, as them remaining on my team, or whether, like I said, they left and went someplace else. That, I think, made a world of difference to those individuals. And since then, one has moved on to lead their own team. One has moved on to a different department, and one is still one of my leaders under me. He now leads a team. He still reports into me. So they all took 3 very different paths, but I'd like to believe that I helped them and supported them in achieving what each one of their missions were. So I think that's a pretty considerable and pretty sizable thing you can do as a leader for the people that work for you.
Absolutely. I think that's great. And that's something that I just want to continue. I don't want to lose sight of that, right? All of my managers were individual contributors. And as I moved up, they moved up to become senior leaders in their work, but I don't want it to just stop there. So I think Jeremy, great advice there. Ozzy, great advice. I want to continue to build mature their styles, their management styles and their career, whatever they want to do. So
I would caution one thing, I agree with everything that Jeremy and Ozzy said. sometimes you need to listen to your managers also, and and understand that maybe it's not the job for them. And that's one of the hardest things, as a leader, that you'll need to do, right? I've had that happen to me before. In fact, the person that uh, was an individual contributor, they became a manager of a team, a different team than they were originally on, which I think is key too. There's a difference between becoming a manager of a team that you're already kind of the de facto manager in, because you're the technical lead, or you're the person that has been there the longest tenure wise. But sometimes people won't say it to you. There'll be ways that you can recognize it, and you need to keep your eyes open and ask the right questions, even though they're not going to totally be upfront about it. It might not be, and that could even just be someone's looking for a new change. It doesn't necessarily need to be that they don't want to manage people.
Yeah, you have to have your finger on the pulse.
I agree. And that's why I think what Jeremy said was really important. Something I need to do a lot more. So
It's something we
great
all need
advice.
to do. We all learn that.
Yeah. And we all have
You're
to
not
keep
unique.
we all have to keep reminding ourselves of that. Even if even if we've learned it and know it, it's a constant reminder.
Ozzy's very humble. I try to be on this call. I don't think about that at all anymore. You get to a certain point in success, right, Ozzy, where it's just second nature. No, but it's true.
Awesome.
So
Great.
I think we've got a good session tonight. Jen, it was wonderful to meet you. I don't want this to end. I don't think we do. I think this is just a part of an ongoing conversation. And yeah, it's great to learn a little bit about you. Text us at any time. We'll set up some time to chat again soon.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut across you.
No, please.
No.
I just want to say thank you for inviting me on the podcast. This is my first podcast, and I'm really excited to do this with you guys. And I really appreciate all the advice and guidance you've provided tonight.
Well, hopefully it's helpful.
It was.
Jen, when you get to your second podcast like I am, then you'll feel a lot more comfortable. It'll be like, like wearing an old shoe.
Yeah.
I'm at 7 only because John's at 7.
Yeah. We have twice the experience of this man
Yes.
here.
Oh,
And
yes.
I was
Don't
going to
do
say
it.
it, Ozzy, but I didn't.
Don't do it.
So
Thank
thank
you.
you very much, Jen, and I think we're good.
All right. See you guys.